to make another one. Hi, I'm Jack Boyle. Thank you so much for joining me here in San Antonio, Florida at my pottery shop. And it's called San Antonio Pottery. You can find us on the World Wide Web at sanantoniopottery.net. Today, our lesson is going to be a lesson in making soup tureens. This is a soup tureen. And I'm also going to go ahead and go over how to make a ladle. And the first thing I want to point out, though, is the differences that I make between a lid for a soup tureen and a lid for a casserole. Because we've already gone over the casserole, so let me kind of point this out to you. And for the casserole, I make a flanged lip where this lid, which is basically just a shallow bowl, fits into that flange or gallery. Alright, for my soup tureens, I put the flange on the lid itself. Okay? And it fits into a rather simple lip of this, like so. Okay? I also want to point out to you the somewhat congruous lines of the soup tureen, where I make it more of a bowl. This lid is more of a bowl form. And if you look at this line from the curve of the pot, it continues past this lip to the curve of the lid itself. Nice continuous line. Alright, I'm just going to go ahead and put these aside for now. And I will get my clay ready. Actually already wedged my clay. I wanted to actually show you another lid on a teapot, which is also actually a combination of those two types of lids, where I have the flange inside this lip of the teapot. I also have a rather long flange on the lid itself. It's a combination of those two different types of lids. This is so that you can have less of a chance of the actual lid falling out when you're using this teapot. Alright? Start with, for a soup tureen, a good sized soup tureen, I mean, if you're going to make a soup tureen, you might as well make it big enough to hold a good amount of soup. So we're going to start out by showing you the different tools that we're going to use. And our basic tools, of course, are rib and my all-important acrylic sponge. I like the uniformity of an acrylic sponge. I know that the natural sponges are often recommended by other potters, but just my preference. We're going to need, later on, we're going to need a trim tool. This is my loop tool. Sometimes I'll use the smaller loop tool. And of course, the ever-present needle tool for trimming the top if it's necessary. I'll use this old beat-up credit card. I'll use that to compress the bottom of the piece against the wheel head to make that stronger and less susceptible to cracking. And of course, my favorite decorative tool, which is this metal serrated edge on a rib here. And the most important tool I'm using today are my calipers. Dirty as usual. And again, I'll point out to you that you'll probably be hearing at some point cars and trucks going by in front of us. They make a lot of noise at my real pottery shop here in San Antonio, Florida. And okay, so like I said, we're going to make a pretty good size soup tureen. I start out with approximately 8 pounds clay. I have it already pre-wedged. Here it is. This is what 8 pounds of clay looks like. You can see the spiral that I got when I was wedging. That pretty much kind of gets the particles aligned in the same circular direction. It helps, it aids in the centering and also just the overall integrity of the piece. I'll wet my wooden bat and boom. Some authority, slap that thing down as close to the center as possible. I'm not going to talk too much about your basic centering today. At this point we're pretty much beyond that. You do want to slap this as close to the center as I can get. Centering is full speed of the wheel. Now the larger pieces of clay are somewhat intimidating when you're first starting out making pottery. So I really recommend that you go up in small increments. You can handle a certain size piece of clay and you're very confident you can do what you want with that. Then move up to a bigger piece of clay. And with the bigger piece of clay, I almost always wheel wedge and do this cone form, which helps to, what I really concentrate on here is to make sure that very top piece of the clay is centered. And as I bring it back down, it's centered as I go. Okay, we're centered. Go ahead and flatten that out. Open the well. This is the point where I'm going to check the thickness of the bottom. Make sure I have enough clay for trimming later on. I'm satisfied with that. Go ahead and pull the floor towards me to widen it. This is where you want to make sure the floor is flat and compressed. If you have problems cracking, it's normally because compression wasn't done at this point. I'm going to use this credit card. It's one of those free ones you get in the mail that they're always trying to entice you with. Instead of throwing them away, I use them as a pottery tool. So right in the center, I put this corner here right in the center, just actually to the right of the center. Compress, bring it over. Now you can see that this clay is not quite centered. This gives you an excellent opportunity to recenter your wall. What I do is here is I'm squeezing it with my long finger and my thumb, and I'm going to compress it with my sponge on top. There. Much better. Okay, my first pass, still with just my left hand, right directly in front of me, thumb on the outside, long finger on the inside. I'm just going to go straight up to the wall here, synchronizing the rotation of the wheel, the amount of pressure I'm using, squeezing that bottom ring of clay and pulling it up through the wall, thinning the wall, and making it taller. Whenever I feel any kind of friction, I go back to my water source. Want a little bit of water on the inside wall, wetting the outside wall. And get away this little distracting clay that's collected along the bottom of the piece. Grab this bottom piece, the rotation of the wheel, synchronize that rotation. Because now with this pass, I'm going to push in pretty severely to make that bottom smaller. But as I come up, I'm going to be putting a little more pressure from the inside out to round out the form. Note you're never staying in one place, compressing, you're always moving that clay through the wall. Do one more of those, make this a little bit wider. That bottom piece is pretty much finished. I do want to take a measurement with my calipers at this point. Stop the wheel. These fancy calipers you can get at almost any supply house that measures the same measurement on this side as it is on this side. And you'll see how important that is in just a moment. So the measurement I want right now is the interior dimension here. There we go. Okay. The lid is about 3.5 pounds of clay. So it's a lot of clay for a lid. Like I said, I like a nice bowl form for my lid to continue that curve. it in the middle. It's really important to get your clay really secured on the wheel head. It happens with all potters that at some point your clay is going to fly off the wheel, and if you're lucky, it won't land in somebody else's lap. You recall that lid, the soup tureen, I keep the flange on the lid itself. So that takes a little bit of a tricky maneuver here. Start by making sure I've got plenty of clay to trim away. Now with the lid, I do not spread the floor out. I keep it at pretty much a single point. So I want to have that continuous line of a curve from the inside to the outside. And here I'm going to kind of get an idea of where I want to end up. You'll see where that flange is going to occur right there. Gives me an idea of how much I want to stretch that to start with. You see I've got my thumbs really undercut here for this piece. I'm going to grab this, I'm elevating it, and I'm pointing up, but look at how thick I'm going to leave this lid, the lip of this lid. Before I do any other widening, I'm going to go ahead and make that flange right now. Now how I'm doing that is with this very thick lip, I'm going to cut halfway in, go right towards the center. And while I'm at it, I'm just going to go ahead and make it a little bit taller. I like a nice deep flange for this piece. And while I've got this somewhat finished on the edge, I know that I need to make it the whole piece wider. So I use the clay that's here in the center of the piece to do that. Let's check that. Maybe a little bit more. See how we're doing. And it's pretty much right on the money. So we can straighten it out a little bit. These are our two basic pieces that we need for our soup tureen. We made the bottom, which is it's a tall bowl, and we have the lid, which is a bowl with a flange on it. So let's go ahead and we're going to stop the wheel in a second and put this aside and let them dry a little bit where we can trim them up. So we'll be back in just a couple minutes. And while we're waiting for that bowl and the lid to dry enough to trim, I'm going to show you how I make my ladle parts. I'm going to start out by centering a piece of clay for the cup. Actually, this is enough for several cups for ladles. It's really another lesson in throwing off the mound. To start with, just make a very small bowl. I like to flare the lip out of my bowl. Keep in mind, it should be what ideally would be approximately a cup when it's all dried and fired. Cool. Flare that lip out a little bit more. Let me go ahead and do my cut down here to let you know. I like to put it on a small base because I'm going to thumb that off later on. Okay, to make this a distinctive ladle cup, I'll show you what I do. I try not to be prejudiced towards left-handed people, so I make this a ambidextrous ladle, which means I'm going to do 2 pour spouts on it. There's one. Oops. Here's the second, just across from that one. And I'm going to make a little indentation where the ladle handle itself is going to go. There you go. It doesn't look like much yet, but in a few minutes I'll show you how that works. Go ahead and put that aside. And now, let me show you how to make a nice long handle. I do a lot of slapping around the clay in the pottery shop. Okay, enough to hold on to. Plenty of water. For this ladle handle, I want to keep it more of a rounded handle as opposed to a flat handle. That's just my preference. So in doing that, I rotate this handle as I'm pulling it. I'm using my whole hand to elongate it. See, anytime I feel like I have any bit of friction, I go back to the well, get some more water. And just from experience, I know how long I want to start with, and I will probably cut this down before we actually attach it. There's the beginning of our ladle handle. I'll go ahead and cut this and put it aside and let it start to stiffen up a little bit. Right here. And the next step will be trimming the lid. And I can't say enough about how important the timing is for trimming. If you try to trim this lid too early, what can easily happen is that with the pressure I'll need to apply to do the knob, it would make this sink in. Obviously, if it's too late, if I let it dry too much, the knob won't stay attached, it'll crack off. Timing is everything. So, of course, I'm looking for this beautiful continuous curve. I don't mind if it's a little flat on the top, because I'm going to cover that with the knob, but from that area down to this lip, a nice congruous curvature form. Use my serrated rib to score this area where I'm going to attach the knob. A little bit of slip. It's always near my wheel somewhere. What I'm doing is I'm conditioning this drier clay for the reception of the more moist clay. This is a little tricky. Really make sure this is adhered well to this piece. So I really just have it sitting in place, and as I slowly rotate this wheel, use the edge of my thumb, push it down towards the lid. Now the edge of my finger, really, to use a technical word, smush it in really good. Lid. That juncture point needs to be similar to the thickness of the lid itself, whether it's solid or hollow. You can go right down to that lid itself in this opening. It's probably preferred to do that. There's different style knobs that I could do at this point as well. So the simplest one is just simply to leave a short kind of a column here. That's a pretty traditional knob right there. Okay, the ones I like to do now are not quite as traditional. It's my own little form where I'll thicken this lip by compressing it. And I'll split the lip. Push that edge down some. Because I know I'm going to close this whole form, I'm going to put a hole right in the center down through the lid itself, which, contrary to popular belief, I'm not doing that because I'm afraid that it'll pop off in the firing. That's a common myth. I do that really just to aid in the drying. It helps to just dry the piece on the inside. Okay, now I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close this form. Just like so. Now that it's closed, I have somewhat of a vacuum in there, and I can really do a lot of different things with this if I want. Right now I'm going to put my finger on here and lift it up, and I compress this part, make it more of a winged out form, like a little spaceship here at this point. Look at the profile. Do a couple little lines here. And stop the wheel and do a couple of things. And I can leave that knob just the way it is. It looks fine. But I'm going to go ahead and do little pinches on here. Give it a little bit more character. Do 3 or 4. I've kind of settled on 3. Equidistant. And I'm going to go ahead and do my little signature design with my metallic serrated rib. And the last thing, because this is a soup tureen, I want to do a cutout on the lid itself for the ladle. I'm going to pick out a spot here where the design will accommodate the curve, which is right here. Get rid of that clay. It's a little rough. It's got a sharp edge on it, so I'm going to take my sponge, smooth that edge out, and I'll elevate it a little bit. You can see that. Pull it up just a little bit. And maybe I'll run a line with my all-important thumbnail tool again. Okay, our lid is finished. Put this aside. And now we'll trim the bottom. Okay, anytime I'm trimming, again, I'm going to make the space a little bit smaller, give a little bit more elegance, give a little lift visually. I'm going to bring that outside perimeter of that foot in a little bit. And when you're just beginning, of course, you always have more clay around the bottom area here. Good time to lighten the load, so to speak. So you see what I'm doing is an undercut here, which in the way that I apply my glaze is important later on, because it gives me something to hold on to when I'm dipping into a bucket. And also, as we'll learn in the glaze video, that glaze in the kiln, as it's firing, becomes a molten, almost like a lava. So it's moving, it's actually moving in the kiln towards the end of the firing, and oftentimes it'll gather right around the edge of this undercut. It's like the last stop before that train gets off the track. Okay, so I've established this outside perimeter, give myself a little undercut here. The next step, let's go ahead and establish the inside perimeter of this foot. So I'm making this line right now. I'm sure I'm satisfied with that, and generally speaking, the proportion, the thickness of this foot will be proportionate to about the thickness of the lip of the piece. It should be approximate to the thickness of the wall of the piece. Establish that inside perimeter. Now I start carving from the inside to that line. pretty well trimmed. We'll take my sponge, soften any hard edges. Look at the profile of the piece, make sure it's got that continuous curve that I'm always talking about. A little bit more clay off here, I think. Stop. And I like to use the blunt end of my needle tool to sign my piece. So while it's upside down, B-O-Y-L-E, and the year, 2008. And go ahead and pull the handles for the handles of this piece. For the side handles. So as opposed to that ladle handle, it'll be thicker and wider compared to the round type of handle. I make one long handle, knowing that I'm going to cut it in half, so I'll have two side handles. So looking at the thickness here, I'm looking at the thickness of the lip here. Okay, in preparation for these handles, it is good advice to score the piece where it's going to go. I'll just use my serrated metal rib. Do that. Well, first, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to see exactly where I sign my pieces. I like my signature to match up with my handles. Okay, so put a handle right here. Score it. Slip it. Just keep a towel handy so I can wipe my hands off. I like to work with dry hands. Okay, so here we go. Blend those ends in with the body. Okay, now to match my knob, you know, those little twerps I did there. I'm going to do that on each of these handles to kind of mimic that. So I try to get the lids and the bodies of pieces together as soon as possible because they can shrink independent of each other and not fit after a very short amount of time. So there we go. We have our finished soup tureen. There we are. We'll come back in just a minute and I'll show you how I make the ladle, put those ladle parts together. Okay, well, now we're back. We're going to go ahead and put the ladle parts together. There's our finished ladle. I'll start with the handle. Oops. The handle, I'm going to go ahead and round off these sharp edges and give a little bit of an angle as well. And I traditionally put a hole through the handle at the end in case people want to put a leather thong through it to hang it somewhere. So I'll make sure that's nice and smooth on both sides. You get an idea of how big this is going to be. It looks to me like it's a little too long. So I'm going to snap off this end here. Okay, and this is the side that I did that indentation for the handle itself. And make it a little flat so when it's sitting it won't rock so much. You sit that down like so. I will go ahead and score where that handle is going to go. Always scoring and slipping. If you run out of slip by your wheel, you can just use a little bit of soft clay. Next I'm going to, because this is stiff enough to hold that form, I'm going to re-soften the end that's going to actually go against the ladle. Just by pulling it like I pull a handle. Line it up, a little bit of pressure on it. I'm going to do this here. I'm going to definitely finish off that other end, but while I have it in this upright position, put it down here. I like to do a little decorative piece of clay right here at this juncture, right? This point. So I'm going to drop of water. I have a little, just a bead of clay here, a small marble of clay, right there. Very much like my thumb stops on my coffee mugs. Pressure is towards the lip and then down on the handle. Now turn it over and apply pressure to smooth that end of the handle into the ladle body. And that is how we make our ladles. And there we go. It's the end of our soup tureen and ladle demonstration. Thank you so much for joining us here at San Antonio Pottery. I'm Jack Boyle signing off. Happy potting!